So, you want to achieve cinematic shots like this, but you don't know where to start? I've got you, because in this video, I'll be showing you exactly, without any secrets, how I built my lighting setup first, how I framed and overall composed different angles, how I managed white balance and color temperatures, and of course, my color grading process on this moody car scene. Stick around, because while cinematography looks complex, it can actually be much simpler than you might think.
This video is not sponsored. I'm just using gear that I personally own. Everything I use in this video is linked below.
And now, let's dive right in. As to the location, I chose an urban underground parking garage. It just sets the vibe perfectly for a moody scene. And I was actually lucky. One entire row of ceiling lights was dead, which gave me basically full control over my own lighting. And that's exactly what we want. You see how dark it is inside the car? Perfect to start from scratch with building our light setup. I started with my key light as the biggest light source, and I used the Zhiyun Molis X100 RGB with a big softbox. With 100 watts, it's surprisingly powerful, even when it's battery powered and not externally. Because it was so dark and the windshield reduces the light intensity even further, I had to push this tiny light to 100%, and it worked out pretty well. But what's even more important than finding the right intensity is this. Looking at your set and asking yourself where the real light in this frame would come from, so you can motivate it and make it feel natural. And you guessed it. These halogen ceiling lights are definitely what you would expect first when it comes to where the light is coming from. So motivating exactly that, slightly top down and in a 45-degree angle, was the right call for me. As you can see, it not only lifts the exposure on the subject while creating some nice contrast, it also hits some other elements, like the steering wheel and the rear view mirror. Both add depth and realism to the frame, I think, but to me, the mirror pulled away too much attention, and we want the subject to remain in focus. So what I did was I covered the specific part of the windshield with a light skirt, and that blocked exactly the spill of light that hit the mirror. It now looks more focused and controlled. Watch how much cleaner the frame gets. So at this point, the setup consisted of my key light with a softbox and a bit of blocking. When I checked the image on the monitor though, it felt too dark, especially on the shadow side of me, so I added a fill light to increase the exposure in that area. For that, I used the SmallRig RC60B at around 12% intensity, and I put it on the opposite side of the other light, bouncing it into the wall with a reflector dish. That way I thought it's going to be very subtle. It was not until I looked at the footage in post though, when I realized that this was way too much. So I guess I should have checked the monitor a little closer. Because the subject got brighter, yeah, which technically isn't wrong, but you can clearly see how it breaks the moody vibe. So kind reminder here, or actually German saying, weniger ist mehr, which basically means less is often more. I don't know if that makes sense in English, but what does make sense is this. Contrast makes everything look better and more cinematic. So for the final shot, I decided to leave the fill away. Now, among contrast, here's another thing that makes most people kill their cinematic looks without even realizing it. Getting this wrong can make or break the image, and it's actually really simple. Let me explain. So I assumed halogen lamps like these would be rather cold in color temperature. So I set my light to 5600 Kelvin and white balanced my camera there as well. That way, the skin should have looked right and neutral. And it actually did. But apparently, these lights here were actually much warmer than expected. You can see it here. My face is neutral, but the background is glowing orange. With the naked eye in the garage, that was hard to tell, but on the monitor, it was obvious. Just a quick tip here, using S-Log Assist or a conversion LED really helps to see the colors accurately on the monitor. And with that, the solution was really easy. I slowly dialed the Kelvin on my light down and ended up around 3600 Kelvin, which matched the temperature of the ceiling lights. I also set my white balance to 3600 Kelvin because that way the skin stayed neutral and the background this time shifted to a cooler tone that fit the mood. Remember, matching the white balance to the most dominant light source will make the image look the most neutral. If your light source is set to a color temperature above your white balance, it appears cooler. If it's set to a color temperature below your white balance, it appears warmer. And there are often other things that have an influence on the temperature as well. Not only different practical lights like these, But look what happens when I roll down my window. Totally different colors due to the cool glass. And I know figuring all this out in the beginning is quite nerve-wracking, but trust me, it's worth it. To me, this is the most important part when it comes to setting an adequate base for color grading. But before we get into that, let's talk about another factor that makes your footage pro-level cinematic: composition and framing. I shot the whole thing on my Sony a7S III with a 24-70 2.8 lens at 35mm. I wanted it wide enough so you could feel the car and the environment the subject was in. I placed the subject on the left third using the rule of thirds and took advantage of leading lines. These big pillars in the background, the ceiling lights, and even the window frame. Just think about basically anything that pulls the viewer's eye to the subject. It's a very powerful tool to make an image easy to look at and drive focus to what's important. And when I finally reviewed my first take, well, so the shot looks really good, but apparently, I don't know if you can see that, but you can see my leg. I gotta fix that. So I fixed it by shooting the scene again with my legs down, and I decided to capture 2 more angles of the same scene. Because with simple setups like this, it's really easy to just move the camera or the light just slightly and create a whole different shot. For this one, I put on a 135mm lens, shooting through the windshield from the shadow side of my face to add some shape and depth to it. It's the same one light setup, just a different angle and lens that instantly makes it a first alternative to the first shot. The other one was a silhouette shot with hard instead of soft light. For that, I took a SmallRig RC60B with a reflector dish, moved it to the other side way back and placed it higher, making the light source physically smaller relative to the subject and therefore much harder. Remember, a small light source relative to the subject equals hard light. A big light source equals soft light. For this last angle, I placed the tripod at the open trunk and filmed through the back of the car. I chose the same left third framing, no leading lines this time because the silhouette shot is focused enough. Here you can see how I controlled everything via the monitoring app from inside the car because I can't stand when the autofocus is bouncing around, and manual focus gives me exactly the control that I need. And just like that, you've got 3 completely different looks, each using only one light. Now let's talk what we've all been waiting for, shall we? How I color graded my footage. I started with the basic Rec 709 conversion to bring back the colors and contrast into the flat looking log image. Then I used DEHANCER Pro and chose the Kodak 2383 film print, which is my favorite. I brought the exposure down by 0.25, pushed the tonal contrast just slightly to +1, and the color density to 82. I also added just a minimal amount of grain at 1 with shadows at +3. Barely visible, but enough to give it some more texture and roughness. Of course, I also added some filmic halation and bloom to make the image even softer. All that gives us a decent first image, and you could leave it like that. But I wanted to double down on the movie style, so I softened the skin by pulling back the highlights with a mask and desaturating it slightly. I then did the same thing on the shirt. So basically, pulling back all the bright areas to make the overall mood feel a little more moody and grounded. In the background, I pushed more teal and blue tones to create a strong complementary contrast against the warm skin. It just kept the overall atmosphere cool while separating the subject through the, I guess you could say, teal and orange color contrast. Finally, I pulled the overall saturation down by -5. It's subtle, but to me, that makes it feel more filmic. And one last distracting element in the back were those red pipes. To me, they pulled the eye way too much away from what's important. So I color matched them to the cool blue tones by completely desaturating them. It's those simple tweaks that don't seem to be too important, but can clean up the frame massively. And finally, applying the grade to all angles that I shot made them look pretty consistent. Sure, it may seem different because this one was shot through glass, this one was not, and this one had no elements other than my face in the frame, which makes it less colorful in general. But overall, it looks like a consistent set of shots, I think. And it's just crazy what you can create when lighting, composition, and grading all comes together. So, what do you think of the look? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Peace.